Earth. Thank you. Whoa. Doesn't look like we could get too many more people in this place. Let me thank Tegan Ward and Tim Ellis and Larry Cohn and Jim Hightower for the comments and the music they performed. Thank you guys very much. But mostly, thank you all for being here. This is the political revolution. You are part of millions of people who are standing up, who are fighting back, and who are demanding a government that works for all of us, not just a handful of wealthy campaign contributors. The American, when we began this campaign 11 months ago, we were considered a fringe candidacy. After all, who could possibly believe, the media said, that millions of people are prepared to make a political revolution? When we began this campaign, we were 70 points behind in the national polls to Secretary Clinton. 70 points. In the last 2 weeks, 2 out of 3 national polls had us ahead. In the last month, we have won 8 out of 9 caucuses and primaries. In general election matchups, in the last poll done by CNN, we were beating Donald Trump by 20 points. And in almost every instance, our margin against Trump is wider than Secretary Clinton's. And if there is a large voter turnout a week from today here in New York State, we're going to win here as well. Let me just speak for a moment about 2 incidents yesterday that occurred that really tell us where we are as a nation. You heard a few moments ago from Larry Cohn. Larry is the former president of the Communication Workers of America, one of our great unions. And I was in Buffalo yesterday talking to employees of Verizon who are going out on strike. And that is a very difficult decision. Nobody goes out on strike without a lot of thought, because there's a lot of pain going on in families when you don't have any income coming in. But they're going out on strike because they refuse to be beaten down by a greedy corporation who could care less about them or the people of this country. All they want is more and more profit, and it doesn't matter what happens to their employees or people in America. This is what they want to do. They want to cut benefits for their employees. They want to throw American workers out on the street and move their calling centers to low-wage countries around the world. They are not investing in inner cities in America where people today do not have quality broadband. And they got their lawyers and tax accountants working overtime so that in a given year, despite making billions of dollars in profit, they pay nothing, not a nickel, in federal taxes. That's story number one, but what Verizon is doing is not anything new. That is what major corporation after major corporation has done in the last number of decades. I was recently attacked by Jeffrey Immelt, the head of General Electric. And I say to Mr. Immelt, if you continue to downsize in America, to outsource our jobs to low-wage countries around the world, if you continue to do your best to avoid paying taxes in the United States of America, you will have to contend with me if I'm elected President of the United States. Major corporation after major corporation has shown its contempt for its employees and, in fact, for the people of our country. What they have said is, fine, you work for me for 30 years, it doesn't matter, we're shutting down, we're moving to Mexico, we're moving to China. And we're going to do our best to avoid paying any taxes in this country. There has got to be a change in the culture of corporate America. They're going to have to pay attention to the needs of the people in this country and not just their bottom line. That's story number one. Verizon, General Electric. But let me give you another story. Just yesterday, it was reported that Goldman Sachs, one of the major financial institutions in this country, reached an agreement with the federal government to pay a settlement of $5 billion. Now, they reached that settlement because they were selling worthless packages of subprime mortgage loans. They were lying about what was in those packages. And what they did, and what other financial institutions also did, they were not alone, was to create a situation 8 or so years ago which resulted in the collapse of Wall Street, which sent this country into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. And all of you know what the results of that were. Millions of Americans lost their jobs, they lost their homes, and in some cases they lost their life savings because of the greed and recklessness and illegal behavior on Wall Street. So what you have now, you have a corporate culture which says we don't have to worry about the people who built our companies. We don't have to worry about the consumers that created the wealth for our companies. We don't have to worry about anything except our bottom line. If we can make $5 more by shutting down in Rochester or Buffalo or any place else and move to China, that's all we have to worry about. And I say to that corporate culture, those days are over. They are not going to destroy the middle class of this country just to see billionaires make even more money. Those days are over. Let me take a moment to talk about some of the very significant differences that exist between Secretary Clinton and myself. And those differences are profound. You can tell a great deal about what candidates will do based on how they raise their campaign funds. Sad, but truthfully, it now takes an enormous amount of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, to run for President of the United States. And we had to make a decision early on in our campaign as to whether or not we would do what every other campaign has done, and that is establish a super PAC. Well, after about 1/10 of 1 second of thought, we agreed with you. Our campaign does not represent the billionaire class. We do not represent corporate America. We do not represent Wall Street. We do not want their money. Instead, we did something that was revolutionary. We went to the American people, to working families, and we said, if you want a candidate who is going to stand with you and take on the big money interest, help us out. And then what happened was literally unbelievable. In the last 11 months, we have received over 6 million individual campaign contributions. That is more individual campaign contributions than any candidate in the history of our country up until this point. Anybody here know what the average contribution is? That's right, $27. What that means is we have shown the world that you can run a winning national campaign without being dependent on Wall Street and the big money interests. And that, in the context of contemporary American politics, is revolutionary. Now, Hillary Clinton has chosen a different path. And the path that she has chosen is to establish a number of super PACs that are out raising large sums of money from powerful special interests. During the last filing period, our largest super PAC reported raising $25 million from special interests, including $15 million from Wall Street. Does anybody seriously believe that you can be an agent of change if you are taking money from the most powerful special interest in this country? Our job is to stand up to these powerful special interests, not to take their money. But it is not just her super PAC. Secretary Clinton, as you may know, has given a number of speeches on Wall Street, including speeches to Goldman Sachs, in which she received $250,000 a speech. Now, what I have said is if you're going to receive $250,000 a speech, it must be an incredibly brilliant speech. It must be an extraordinarily insightful speech. It must be a speech written in Shakespearean prose. It must be a speech enlightening all people. And that is why I believe Secretary Clinton should release the transcripts of those speeches. It would do the world a great deal of good if the brilliance in those speeches could be shared with all of us. But it is not just how we raise money for our campaigns which distinguish us. It is also another issue which is not a sexy issue, but it is an issue of enormous consequence. Media doesn't talk about it at all, but millions of people have suffered the consequence of disastrous trade policies. I was elected in my state of Vermont to the Congress in 1990. And when I took office, it occurred to me very quickly that NAFTA and other ensuing trade agreements were written by corporate America with the sole purpose of allowing large corporations to shut down here, move to low-wage countries abroad, and then bring their products back into America. That's what I feared, and I was out on the picket lines in opposition to NAFTA. And what I feared is exactly what has happened over the last number of decades. Here in New York State, in my state of Vermont, all over this country, what corporations have done is shut down factories, thrown millions of workers out on the street as they move to Mexico, China, and other low-wage countries. I opposed every one of these disastrous trade agreements. Secretary Clinton supported virtually every one of these disastrous trade agreements. If elected president, we are going to have new trade policies in this country. If corporate America wants us to buy their products, they damn well better start investing in America, not in China. All of you know that one of the very, very important parts of a president's job is foreign policy. The most important debate over foreign policy in the modern history of this country took place in the year 2002, and that debate was over Iraq. I listened very, very closely to what President Bush and Dick Cheney and Don Rumsfeld and all these guys had to say. I listened closely, and I concluded that they were not telling the truth. Not only did I vote against that war, I helped lead the opposition to going to war in Iraq. Gives me no pleasure to tell you this, but if you go to my website, look at what I said when I was on the floor of the House in 2002 in terms of my fears about what would happen if we went into Iraq. And sadly, much of what I feared would happen did happen. Secretary Clinton was then a United States Senator from your state, from New York State. She listened to the same arguments from Bush and Cheney. Her judgment was faulty. She voted for that disastrous war. She has since, I believe, recognized that that vote was a mistake. But what we need is leadership that has the courage to stand up when we need them to stand up. One of the looming crises facing our country and, in fact, the world is whether or not we're going to have enough clean drinking water. This is a problem that has surfaced in New York State, in Vermont, and all over this country. I believe, and I'm very proud that Vermont has led the nation in banning fracking. And if elected president, we will tell the fossil fuel industry that their short-term profits are not more important than preventing people from drinking toxic water. People have a right to know that the water they're drinking is clean. We will fight for a national ban on fracking. Secretary Clinton's views are different. When she was Secretary of State, in fact, she actively pushed fracking technologies in countries all over the world. And she still has refused to come down firmly in favor of a national ban on fracking. Now, this campaign is doing as well as it is because we're doing something very radical. We are telling the American people the truth. The truth is not always pleasant, and it's not pleasant in our personal lives when we have difficulties. It is not happy news politically in the national sense as well. But the bottom line is, you do not go forward personally, we do not go forward as a nation unless we are prepared to deal with the hard truths that face us. And here are some hard truths that as a nation we must deal with. Truth number one, we have a corrupt campaign finance system that is undermining American democracy. American democracy is not a complicated concept. It is one person, one vote. It is not billionaires buying elections, and together we are going to overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. When you have a handful of billionaires like the Koch brothers and a few of their friends prepared to spend some $900 million in this campaign cycle. Friends, that is not democracy. That is oligarchy. We will not allow that. But it is not just a corrupt campaign finance system. We are also going to address and reverse a rigged economy. A rigged economy is an economy in which today the top 0.1% now own almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. A rigged economy is an economy in which the 20 wealthiest people, 20 people, own more wealth than the bottom half of America, 150 million people. Let me tell you, in addition, what a rigged economy is about. It is an economy in which one family, the Walton family that owns Walmart, owns more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people, one family. But to add insult to injury, Walmart, owned by the Waltons, pays wages so low that many of its employees are forced to go on food stamps or Medicaid. And who is paying higher taxes to provide those food stamps and Medicaid? That's right, the middle classes. So you have this insane situation where the middle class is subsidizing the wealthiest family in America. That's crazy. And I say to the Walton family, get off of welfare, pay your workers a living wage. This campaign is asking people to think outside of the box, to think outside of the status quo, not to accept what the corporate media tells you as reality. You know what reality is, not CNN or CBS or ABC. And here is reality. Here is economic reality. For the last 30, 40 years, the middle class of this country has been shrinking. Here is economic reality that despite a huge increase in technology and worker productivity, millions of our people are working longer hours for lower wages. Here is reality. Today we have families by the millions where mom is out working, dad is out working, the kids are out working, and yet 58% of all new income generated goes to the top 1%. Here is economic reality. In America today, our people work the longest hours of any people in a major country. Japanese are very hard workers. We work now longer hours than do the people in Japan. And what that means, and I see this with my own eyes as I go around this country, people are exhausted. They are tired of working 50 or 60 hours a week. They are tired of not being able to spend enough time with their children. You know, it is a funny thing, and you stop and think about it. Again, think outside of the box. Don't accept the options or the worldview given to you by the media. Think about this one for a second. 100 years ago, workers all over this country engaged in demonstrations, and they had these large signs in front of them. And what they said is, we are not beasts of burden. We want a 40-hour work week. That is what they said 100 years ago. And you know what? Today, most workers in America still don't have a 40-hour work week. Something is wrong. An explosion of technology and worker productivity, a global economy, and yet the middle class continues to decline, and almost all new income and wealth goes to the top 1%. Let me be very clear. If elected President of the United States, we are going to create an economy that works for all of us, not just the 1%. Goldman Sachs may not like it, Verizon may not like it, General Electric may not like it, but we will create an economy that works for all of us, not just the people on top. But it is not just a corrupt campaign finance system that we have to address. It is not just a rigged economy. It is also a broken criminal justice system. This is America. This is the year 2016. We should not, we must not have more people in jail in this country than any other country on earth. Again, think about it. Think outside of the box. China, country 4 times our size, a communist, authoritarian country which does not tolerate dissent particularly well. We have more people in jail in this country than does China. This is an issue that we must and we will address. Now, how do we end up where we are? Well, for a start, again, not an issue that is talked about a whole lot, we will talk about it, is that youth unemployment, kids 17 to 20 who graduated high school, if those kids are white, their real unemployment rate, 33%. Latino, 36%. African American kids, 51%. Here is a not so radical idea. We're going to invest in our young people in terms of jobs and education. Not jails and incarceration. It costs less money to send a kid to college than to lock them up. Let's move in that direction. We have also got to take a very hard look at the need for police department reform. All of us are tired of seeing videos on television where unarmed people, often African American, are shot and killed. I was a mayor in Burlington, Vermont for 8 years. I have worked with police officers all over my state and all over this country. Vast majority of police officers are honest, hardworking, doing a very difficult job. But like any other public official, when a police officer breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable. Police culture must change. Lethal force should be the last response, not the first response. We need to demilitarize local police departments. We need to make police departments reflect the diversity of the communities in which they serve. We need to end the private ownership of prisons and detention centers. We need to rethink the so-called war on drugs. Over the last 30 years, millions of Americans have received criminal records for possession of marijuana. Many lives have been destroyed as a result because you got a criminal record. You go out to get a job, it may be hard to get that job. Furthermore, this becomes a racial issue because while whites and blacks do marijuana at about equal levels, blacks are 4 times more likely to be arrested. Today, under the Federal Controlled Substance Act, marijuana is listed as a Schedule I drug, right alongside of heroin. Now, people can argue the pluses and minuses of marijuana, but everybody knows marijuana is not a killer drug like heroin. And that is why I have introduced legislation to take marijuana out of the Federal Controlled Substance Act. But when we talk about drugs, all of you know that this country today is facing a tragic crisis. All over America, people are becoming addicted to opiates and to heroin, and every day, people are dying from overdosing. In my view, if we are going to be effective in addressing this crisis, we need to make substance abuse and addiction a health issue, not a criminal issue. This campaign is a winning campaign because we are listening to the American people and not just wealthy campaign contributors. We are listening to workers who tell me they can't make it on $8 or $9 an hour, which is why we are going to raise the national minimum wage to $15 an hour. This campaign is listening to seniors, disabled vets, and the disability community. Now, unbelievably, at a time when millions of seniors and disabled vets and people with disabilities, at a time when many of them are trying to survive on $11,000, $12,000 a year Social Security, Republicans actually want to cut Social Security benefits. Well, I've got some bad news for them. We are not going to cut Social Security benefits. We're going to expand Social Security benefits. This campaign is listening to women. And what women are telling me is they are sick and tired of going to work and finding out they're making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. They want the whole damn dollar, and they're right. And I know that every man here in this arena is going to stand with the women in the fight for pay equity. This campaign is listening to young people. And they are telling me, how does it happen that when they do the right thing, when they go out and get the best education that they can, they are ending up $30,000, $50,000, $70,000 in debt? We should be rewarding people for getting an education, not punishing them. Here's the truth. 50 years ago, you had a high school degree, you were doing pretty well. And the likelihood is you can go out into the community and get a decent job at decent wages. That was 50 years ago. Well, the world, the economy, and technology have changed. Today, the simple truth is that people need more education. And that is why I believe that when we look at the concept of public education today, it is not good enough to just look at first grade through 12th grade. We need to make public education mean that public colleges and universities will be tuition-free. Some of my opponents think, oh, this is a very radical idea. It is not a radical idea. It is an idea that already exists in Germany and Scandinavia and other countries around the world. They know that they will create a strong economy in the future when they have a well-educated workforce. Furthermore, when we talk about higher education, we have got to end this absurd situation where millions of Americans today are being crushed by outrageously high levels of student debt. Anybody here with student debt? Unbelievable, it really is. It really is unbelievable when you think about it. And I have gone all over this country, and I've talked to people. Young woman graduated dental school in Iowa. We need dentists. She left school $400,000 in debt. This is at a time when we need more dentists. Spoke to a woman in Burlington, Vermont. Her dream was to go to medical school, practice primary health care. That's what she's doing. $300,000 in debt. Talk to a guy in Nevada, 55 years of age. He's been paying off his student debt for the last 25 years. He's more in debt today than he was when he took the loan out. Talked to a kid in Iowa, 2 years of college, dropped out, $60,000 in debt. We have got to take a deep breath, think outside of the box. It is insane. It is insane that people have got to pay off their debt for decades, can't afford to buy a car, get a house, get married, have kids, because they are paying off that student debt. And that is why I believe we've got to change the law, allow people with student debt to refinance their loans with the lowest interest rates they can find. Now, my opponents say, well, Bernie, you know, you're like Santa Claus. You're giving out all this free stuff. You're making public colleges and universities tuition free. You're going to lower substantially student debts. How are you going to pay for that? I will tell you, and I want you to think about this, and this means, again, thinking outside of the box. When Wall Street's greed and illegal behavior destroyed our economy, they went begging the Congress for a bailout. And against my vote, they got that bailout. I believe that it is totally appropriate today for us to impose a tax on Wall Street speculation. Which will bring in more than enough money to make public colleges and universities tuition free and lower student debt. Now, I understand that Wall Street and Goldman Sachs and these guys may not like it. Tough luck. The middle class bailed out Wall Street. Now it is Wall Street's time to help the middle class. This campaign is listening to the African American community. And as I have campaigned throughout this country, I have seen things that are literally unbelievable. And it's an eye-opener. I did not know these things. I was to Flint, Michigan, and I met with parents whose children have been poisoned by lead in the water. I was in Detroit, Michigan, where their public school system is on the verge of collapse. I have been in Baltimore, Maryland, in a community where Freddie Gray was killed, where there are no grocery stores, none, where there are no bank branches, where unemployment rate is somewhere around 50%, where the school system is failing. And what the African American community is asking, and justly so, how does it happen that we have trillions of dollars to spend on a war in Iraq we never should have gotten into? How can we give tax breaks to billionaires, but supposedly we don't have the funds to rebuild our inner cities? If elected president, our national priorities will change. We will invest in rebuilding inner cities. This campaign is listening to the Latino community. There are 11 million undocumented people in this country. Many of them are being exploited because they have no legal protection. Many of them are living in fear and in the shadows. I agree with the Latino community that now is the time to move forward toward comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. And if Congress does not do its job and pass that kind of legislation, I will use the executive powers of the presidency to do all that I can. This campaign is listening to a group of people whose voices are very rarely heard, and that is the Native American community. Anybody who has studied the history of our country, going back before we became a country, understands that the Native American people were lied to, were cheated, and that many of the treaties they negotiated were broken. And yet we owe the Native American people a debt of gratitude that can never be repaid. They have provided us with some of the best parts of our culture. They have taught us, among many other things, that as human beings, we are part of nature. And that the human species will not survive if we continue to destroy nature. A Sanders administration will change the nature of our relationship with the Native American people. I am a member of the U.S. Senate Committee on the Environment. I have talked to scientists all over our country and all over the world. Bottom line is, climate change is real. It is caused by human activity, and it is already causing disastrous harm in our country and around the world. And what the scientists are also telling us is if we do not act boldly within the next several years, the horrific situation of today will only become much worse, that we're looking at a process by which at the end of this century, not such a long time, planet Earth will be between 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. And that means more drought, more floods, more extreme weather disturbances, more acidification of the ocean, more rising sea levels, and more international conflict as people fight over limited natural resources. As human beings and as custodians of this planet, we have the moral responsibility to leave this planet in a way that is healthy and habitable for future generations. Together, we will take on the fossil fuel industry. We will transform our energy system. We will transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energies. I have been criticized for saying this in the past, so let me say it again. I believe that health care is a right of all people. I believe that health care is a right, not a privilege. I believe that there is something profoundly wrong when the United States today is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people. Today, despite the gains, and there were many, of the Affordable Care Act, and I'm on the committee that helped write that bill, 29 million Americans have no health insurance. Many of you are underinsured with high deductibles and co-payments, and every day we're getting ripped off by the drug companies who charge us the highest prices in the world. And then to add insult to injury, we end up spending far, far more per capita on health care than do the people of any other country on earth. And that is why I believe we have got to take on the drug companies, take on the insurance companies, and pass a Medicare for all single-payer program. Let me tell all of you, Donald Trump will not become President of the United States. He will not become president because in every national and virtually every state poll, we are beating him by double-digit numbers. He will not become president because the American people will never elect a candidate who insults Mexicans and Latinos, who insults Muslims and women, who insults veterans, who insults the African American community. And I want you all to remember something which a lot of people have forgotten. Before he announced his candidacy for president, Trump was one of the leaders of the so-called birther movement. You remember that? Now, the birther movement was an incredibly ugly and vicious effort to undermine the legitimacy of the first African-American president in the history of this country. It was not an effort to say we disagree with Obama. You could disagree with Obama. It was an effort to say that because this man is black, he wasn't really born in America, he should not be president of the United States. Now, I have always found it interesting. My father was born in Poland, immigrated to this country. President Obama's father was born in Kenya. Yet isn't it interesting, nobody has ever asked me for my birth certificate. Everybody here knows that real change, which is what our campaign is about, never takes place from the top on down. It is always from the bottom on up. "100 years ago, when workers in this country were forced to work 7 days a week, 15 hours a day, when they could be fired arbitrarily, when they had no say about anything regarding their job, they said, enough is enough. We're going to stand together. We're going to form trade unions and have collective bargaining. For hundreds of years, African Americans and their allies stood up against racism, segregation, and bigotry. And how many of those heroes were killed, were beaten, ended up in jail, we will never know. But united, they said that in this country, we will end bigotry of all kinds. People forget this, but 100 years ago, not a long time from an historical perspective, women in America did not have the right to vote, to get the education they wanted, or do the jobs they wanted 100 years ago. But the women of this country and their male allies stood up, organized, fought back, and said that in America, women will not be second-class citizens. If we were here 10 years ago, which is no time at all from an historical point of view, somebody would have jumped up and said, you know, Bernie, I think that by the year 2015, gay marriage will be legal in 50 states in this country. What would have happened is the person next to him or her would have said, you are nuts. That can't happen. But because the gay community and their straight allies took on incredible hatred and bigotry, because they had the courage to stand up and fight back, they convinced America that people have a right to love whoever they want, regardless of gender. And let me give you two other examples of how change takes place when people stand up and fight back. Contemporary examples. If we were here 5 years ago, no time at all, somebody jumps up and says, Bernie, I think the $7.25 an hour federal minimum wage is a starvation wage. It really is awful. We've got to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. If somebody had said that 5 years ago, person next to him would have said, $15 an hour, you are nuts. You want to more than double the minimum wage. It can't happen. Maybe we can get it up to $8 or $9 an hour. 15, you're unrealistic. You're thinking too big. Think smaller. But then what happened is workers in the fast food industry, they went out on strike. They stood up and they fought back. And then a few years ago, Seattle, Washington, $15 an hour. Los Angeles, San Francisco, $15 an hour. Oregon and California, $15 an hour. New York State, $15 an hour. My point is that if we have a vision, if we have right on our side, if we have justice on our side, when we stand up and fight back, there is nothing we cannot accomplish. And that is where we are today in the year 2016. And all over this country, people are looking at the status quo, and they're saying, it's not working for me. We need fundamental changes. They're looking at massive and grotesque levels of income and wealth inequality. They're looking at a shrinking middle class. They're looking at the fact that we are the only major country on earth not to provide paid family and medical leave, that we are the only major country not to guarantee health care for all people, that we are a country which has the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth, that our infrastructure is collapsing all around us, that millions of our people have left school deeply in debt and are paying off that debt for decades, that we have not been as aggressive as we should be in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel. And people are beginning to stand up, and they are beginning to fight back with the understanding that it is too late for establishment politics and establishment economics. And that is what this campaign is about. No president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it alone. We need a political revolution where millions stand up. Because when we stand together and we don't let the Trumps of the world divide us up, when we stand together, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. A week from today, on the 19th, here in New York State, we've got a very, very important primary. And what I've learned throughout this campaign is when the voter turnout is high, we win. When the voter turnout is low, we lose. Please do everything that you can to come out and vote. Bring your friends, your neighbors. Let us have the largest turnout in Democratic primary history here in New York State. Thank you all.